Well, I think you know which one is Ethan Hawke and which one is Seymour Bernstein. And I'm going to start off with a couple of questions of my own before we take a few from the audience. So I'm going to start by asking Ethan Hawke, before you met Seymour Bernstein at this dinner party of Tony Zito...
My life was nothing.
The real question, though, is, were you already thinking of making a documentary film?
God,
you had directed
no.
fiction, you had written novels. No, it was just meeting Seymour that made you...
The only real thought I had is that someone should make a documentary. You know, I certainly didn't want to lose my own money and spend my own time doing such a thing.
I only accepted the invitation to dinner because I wanted you to make a documentary on me.
The truth is, though, it was a funny thing. We met, and at the dinner party, I had been bugging. I found out that Seymour hadn't played in front of people so long, and I kept saying, "You should play for us, play for us, play for us." And he said that he wouldn't because the piano wasn't up to snuff. Right?
I didn't like that piano very much.
Well, we see how picky you are.
Mm-hmm. And so, but he said if I wanted to, I could come to his house and hear him play. And so it took me a while because I was...
A while? It took you a year.
Yeah. But I showed up.
You did.
Yeah. You said that with some dubious twinkle in your eye. I was there. Anyway, when I saw him play in his own apartment, I was so moved and felt very strongly that somebody should document what you have to offer, that more people, I thought, would be as moved as I was by what I was seeing. And Andrew Harvey, who's in the documentary, was there as well, and he was very adamant that this happened. And all I kept doing is thinking who should do it, and he kept saying, "You should do it. There's no other film people here." And and I was like, "Yeah, I guess." And but I had no. The idea of making a documentary had never occurred to me. I couldn't imagine that I would. If you'd asked me a couple of years ago, "Will you ever make a documentary?" I would think absolutely not.
But once you met this guy, it was obvious that his story had to be told. And for Seymour, I gather you were flattered but reticent at the idea. Had you seen any of Ethan Hawke's films? Did you know who he was? And what made you trust him?
Shall I tell you the truth?
Yes.
It was my pupil who invited me to dinner when I met Ethan and Andrew Harvey. And when he said to me, "We're having some very interesting guests. Ethan Hawke is coming." I said, "Who is that?" Because I don't go to the movies very often. So then I Googled him and I went, "Oh my God, that's Ethan Hawke." But when I heard... It was Andrew Harvey who first mentioned the documentary, right? When he came up to me after I played in my apartment, and he said, just like this, "Whether you want to or not, we're making a documentary on you." In other words, I had no choice. And shall I tell you my impression? My impression was, why are you going to make a documentary on the likes of me? There are so many interesting musicians. What do you want to do it about me for? But now that it's done, and I see this movie and what this man accomplished, first of all, the first time I saw the movie, I flipped out. I kept looking at myself and I said, "God, you look like a fat old man. That's an awful shot. Maybe Ethan can take that shot away or something." After about the third viewing, and now it's been about 15 viewings, I see this movie as a masterpiece. I think he created a masterpiece. And the woman who edited it,
And you know,
Annie, she's genius, pure genius. How they put 2.5 years of shooting disparate shots together into this harmonious whole, it's like a Beethoven sonata.
well, look, the truth is that when we first talked about it, when you really lit up, I thought, was when I said, look, I really didn't want to make a documentary about you, about where you were born and what, where you went to school. I wanted to make a movie about what you were teaching. You know, that I had read through, after meeting him and being really affected and kind of hypnotized by you, I started reading your books. And in your books, I heard you say some things that I'd never heard anyone say about the arts. And I've spent my life doing this. I did my first play professionally when I was 12. And so to hear somebody talk openly about the idea of integrating, often you hear people talk about putting your life in your work, right? But people don't really talk about putting your work into your life. In creating, I'm so moved, when that young man who's playing the Rachmaninoff pieces talks about listening to a friend, the way he listens to himself practice. And if you carry that out, it's something I'd never vocalized, but Seymour did, is that acting on the stage is about, if you put a dog on the stage, right? Everybody watches the dog, obviously, because the dog doesn't know it's acting, right? And there's this incredible life on stage. And part of the game of acting is to create the illusion of spontaneity, right? This illusion that you're actually just living and this is just who you happen to be and they're just magically catching it. That's the game. And of course, to do that, you actually have to kind of be spontaneous. And it's a weird little trick that I've often heard when people talk about Buddhist lessons, about being in the present moment and always being awake and conscious. So all these same ideas apply. And I thought, wow, God, if I could take what I've learned about being present on the stage and be present with my children. And be present with my wife, and be present with my friends, and be
The same person.
It's the same person. And if you could, this word that Seymour uses so much is integration and balance. And it was the first time I heard that so many successful people in the arts, even if it doesn't go well or it does go well, bitterness is this huge disease. It just permeates their whole being, and it's scary.
Performers get into trouble because their whole life, if you're really devoted to your art, art is not a way of life. It actually becomes your life. So while they're practicing, whether it's acting or being a musician, while they're practicing, this becomes their whole world. And when they leave their practicing, they leave that hard-earned discipline behind, and they go into the social world where everything is unpredictable, and they flip right out. So here is what happened when he was getting ready to make the first shoot. We met again at my pupil's apartment where we had dinner. He was there with his wife, and he said to me, he told me what the thesis was of this documentary, what he intended. See, he doesn't know I have total recall. I remember everything he says. This is what he said. My object in making this movie is to demonstrate, especially to young people, how a passion for an art form can not only influence that art form, but influence your life as well. That's exactly what he said. That he spelled out the thesis of the book that I wrote with your own two hands.
Yes, I read it. I loved it. And I thought it was something worthy of watching, you know?
Yeah. Well, the fact that you were able just now to recall exactly what Ethan said leads me to a point that I kept feeling tonight while watching the film, the same way that I felt in Telluride. The art, and maybe even the genius, of being able to listen is so crucial to, first of all, music and acting, presumably to listen to your partners when you're rehearsing and performing. But for teaching in particular, it's not what many have very often assumed. Teaching is, well, I like when you said pouring into the student, but it has so much to do with being able to hear when a note is just slightly off, and there is such a gift when someone who knows better can say, here's how to improve it. Now, if that could be done, not just with the playing of a concerto, but with the way we live our lives, then we would have something even greater.
Well, it can, you know, I mean, that's the kind of the thesis of the movie in a lot of ways. It's the same thing. That's the, you know, whether it's Zen in the art of archery or whatever you want to do, anything done well has a corresponding parallel all over the universe, you know. I mean, that's what I think, and I don't think that I've just kind of watched that be true my whole life. You talk very beautifully about the notion about when somebody's playing well, that their intellect and their emotional life and their physicality become one.
You're sure there's a synthesis. Now look here, if we're going to give a convincing performance on an instrument or through singing, you're a singer.
I was.
Or through acting, if you're going to give a really succinct performance, you start with your emotional response to that particular thing that you're working on. Music, after all, is not a language of words. It's a language of sound, and it's a language of feeling, right? Well, we can't just perform with our feelings alone. Our intellect has to study every mark on the printed page, and we have to translate that into human feelings. Well, you can't just do that alone either. If you don't make a physical connection to what you're feeling and thinking on the instrument, it doesn't communicate. Do you realize how extraordinary that is? You're synthesizing everything that pertains to you, your emotional world, your intellectual world, your physical world. And what do musicians do? They achieve it musically, and they walk away from their instrument, and they don't carry it into their everyday life. The same disciplines can make your personal life as harmonious as your artistic life, and they don't realize that.
See, I have 4 kids, and it's fascinating hearing you say that, because if you can really listen, I have a 3-year-old and a 16-year-old and a couple in between, right? And they're all so different. Everybody knows this, right? But if you can listen to them and use your intellect to understand them, and you can express your love physically, do you know, if these things can all be one action, that's what I mean, it just all corresponds to me. I find it so beautiful.
I think we all, in some way, aspire to the kind of grounded wisdom that Seymour embodies in his life and work. I mean, you raised the question in the film, is there a connection between the monster and the gift? Because, especially this is Genius Week at the Y, we traditionally assume that a genius is an individual with a capital I, somebody who doesn't just interpret like an actor or a musician, but invents, creates. Van Gogh would be the perfect example, or Beethoven. And what I find so moving about your documentary and about you, Seymour, as a human being, is that deep down in my life, I think I would rather be genuinely happy, content, well-rounded and somehow have all the pieces of my life fit together in a way that makes me smile than to be great at one thing and become famous as a genius. Not that I ever think I would. But what you're espousing comes across partly because you never have to raise your voice. I mean, that's one of the things that got me in this film. You know, it's not like someone goes, I know the answer, and, you know, somehow shows you what's great. You whisper. In fact, we said backstage that the movie we've just watched is the anti-whiplash. For those of you who have seen what is a really good movie, the idea of a tyrannical music teacher could not be further from what Ethan has documented here. And I just wish that everybody could somehow learn how to internalize what's in the movie.
It's so beautiful. You know, there's a moment in the movie when when you're teaching the master class at NYU, and there's a young woman there and with the red, and you won't let her get through the first phrase.
The first measure.
The first measure, yeah. And what's fascinating, it was so fun to edit that, to looking at it and studying it and watching it, because as a person, I'm not a pianist. I don't have any real knowledge about it at all. But it was even clear on the day in that room, in a brief amount of time, and this gets to what you were saying, that the genius of teaching is actually being able to help people. A lot of us know when somebody's not good at something, but can you help them? Her playing is noticeably better after spending 7 minutes with you. You know, and it's even an ear like mine, it's clearly more expressive. She's clearly more, and I find that so exciting because a lot of us go through life. What am I even trying to say is that we think that talent, I could never be Bob Dylan because God has graced Bob Dylan, or God has graced Jackson Pollock. But you know, it's not that choice. It discredits all the work that you could put into it. I even think, this is my own weird theory now, but is that even like terms like Saint Francis or Saint so-and-so or Saint so-and-so do all of, and the focus on the miracles, does all of us a disservice? Because as soon as you put in miracles into it, it's like it discounts agency, that we don't have to take St. Francis's teaching seriously because, well, God spoke to him and he did miracles, and I can't do miracles, so I could never be St. Francis. Whereas, did I really lose you all here? Is this really crazy? He started talking about God. You know. What I mean is that we have agency, and just because, I mean, it was kind of heartbreaking when I made my Broadway debut. I was so disappointed. I just got killed, terrible reviews and everything. And I thought, well, this didn't happen to Marlon Brando. You know? I mean, Marlon Brando got great reviews out of the gate, you know? And like, so I had a different journey. Like, that was not going to be me, you know? And I was smart enough to know a certain truth to it. Like, wow, I'm not that good. Huh. I really wish I was, you know? And yet, so do you give up? You know, do you say like, oh, well, I'm not Marlon Brando, so...
Well, in those years, did you...
Are you about to say, I wish you had?
Yeah, no, what was your intent? I want to get a rave review. Was that your intent when you made your Broadway debut?
It wasn't. Because
most young people, that's what they want, right?
Well, to be totally candid with you, I've had this thing. I had some friends that I really believed in, and I really wanted them to like it. And it drew a lot of strength from them. I thought they were really smart. I would have liked it. I'm not good. I cried. You know, it said, Ethan Hawke plays Constantine, more concerned with his pimples than his poetry. Oh. Perhaps he should spend more time at the dermatologist and less at the actor's studio.
No.
And,
whoa.
And
that's terrible.
But obviously, I wasn't concerned with it at all. So yeah, I cared, but I didn't care so much that I thought they were right, you know? Where do I go
Well,
from
I mean, this comes back to
See,
a
I
point in the
think you
film.
should have had plastic surgery.
Thanks. It's not over yet, pal. It's not over yet.
I mean,
My mom says, she keeps saying, you're so
Now, when I made my debut, I remember distinctly how I felt. My intent, months, maybe a year before the actual date, I wanted to succeed so that I could feel good about myself. I wasn't really interested in what they said in the newspaper. I was very idealistic even then. I think it's very important for if we're teachers, to inculcate that in our pupils. You know what? If we don't have the right reasons for doing something, we get into trouble immediately. For example, some of my pupils who go to college, now they want to go to graduate school, right? Well, I always ask them, why do you want to go to graduate school? Well, they say, it's a structured schedule from which I can benefit. I said, and what do you mean by that? You mean that if you don't go to school and you wake up in the morning, you may not be able to practice unless you get a grade? That's going to make you practice? Well, it comes down to that, right? They're going to school for the wrong reasons. So if we don't pursue our art for self-love, it comes down to loving yourself. We have to earn the right to love ourselves. Because after all, the object of being alive altogether is to contribute to other people. Isn't that right? You can't do that unless you earn a certain dignity about yourself. What better way to do that than through an art form? So here comes in the chief question of all. Who is the real person? Is the real person the actor or the musician? Or is the real person the person who is in the social world? The husband, the wife, the father, the mother, right? Which one is the real self? Now, it's my opinion, only my opinion, can't prove it, but I know I'm right. It's my opinion that the essence of who you are resides in whatever talent you have. Doesn't even have to be a musical talent. It could be a talent for cooking, it could be a talent for dancing, it could be a talent for organization. Whatever talent you have, that's the essence of who you are. And if you don't develop it, you see, our talents are autonomous. They have a life of their own. So if we neglect it, it's going to make us miserable. Sometimes making us ill also. So we must pay attention to our talent, and we have to practice very hard for the right reasons. The reasons that I stated, for self-dignity, self-development, and then you become a whole person. So all the people out there have to take this very seriously. They have a hobby, let's say, like I had for photography. When I was a teenager, I had a dark room in the basement of our house. I spent hours there. I became a professional photographer. I took it so seriously. Whatever talent you have to take it to the fullest extent of your ability. And it helps you to become a whole person.
But I'm wondering, too, about a phrase that you mention in the film, a spiritual reservoir. Because I think it's very tempting to believe that each of us, if we could just find the thing that
The
we're good at,
spiritual reservoir, I call it.
that's what I would like to push a little bit, because sometimes I wonder, no matter how good we are at one thing, if we don't believe in something beyond ourselves, is it possible to keep a real equilibrium and engagement in life? Where you question religion at one point, as I sometimes do, if it's too much outside of us. That's what you were talking about, Ethan. You know, the saints and the miracles, I'm not going there. But where do you get, for example, that spiritual reservoir? You mentioned Zen and the art of
Archery.
Archery, and Harvey talks with you about that. Do you have a spiritual source? I mean, I presume you were raised Jewish. Was that of any importance in terms of who you became, or did you actually seek out Buddhism or other sources of spiritual value?
I can't say that I did. I became aware that there is a force inside of me that when I tap it, it answers questions for me and enables me to overcome obstacles. I think that that force is related to a spiritual reservoir that's in all of us, in all living things, including in nature. So in a sense, I always view myself, I'm another kind of tree, except I have a brain and I can move my fingers, but there's some binding element that binds us all together. And it's up to us to draw that power from within us. This becomes very difficult, though, because when we're babies, if we didn't have our mother, we wouldn't survive. You know, someone has to feed us, take care of us. Now we're ready to go to school. If we didn't have teachers, we wouldn't learn how to read. And so it goes, we're always drawing on help from the outside. But if adults were really clever and understood what is going on, they would direct attention to the child insofar as that spiritual reservoir is within them. They have to learn to draw upon it. And it's going to tell them, Mike's teacher, Clifford Curzon, he had a wonderful phrase. He said, Clifford, I don't really how does this phrase relate to that phrase? Well, he said, your inner voice tells you all you need to know. Just consult it.
Okay. I'm going to turn that into what I think for Ethan Hawke might be connections between one phrase and another, if I can use that term, because you were making this documentary at the same time that you were doing quite a few other things, including what I think most people in this room have seen, Boyhood, a film that, you know, at various points for 12 years, you were making with Richard Linklater, and actually, even though it's clearly a fiction film, for me, there's such a documentary element in Boyhood because we are seeing the children, L.R. Coltrane and Lorelei Linklater, in addition to you and Patricia Arquette, literally growing up at various points over a 12-year period. I was wondering if you see the experience of making Boyhood a good kind of preparation or complement for making the documentary.
You know, Boyhood is so connected to the Before trilogy too. Like that, I don't separate them. You know, because I was making Before Midnight at this. I was on the set of Before Midnight editing footage we shot. You know, Greg and Anna would be sending me. You know, it's part of a life's work that are connected. I mean, if I wanted to talk about Richard Linklater's impact, it actually wouldn't. Boyhood was an incredible experience, but Rick is amazingly facile at creating the appearance of documentary, and they're just everything Seymour and I did is genuinely improvised. I mean, we're just winging and talking on the theme, you know. But with Rick's thing, the whole thing is sculpted. It's a different idea, but he has a very beautiful documentary, if anybody wants to see it, called Inning by Inning, which is about a baseball coach, and it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, that Rick had this fear. There's a baseball coach. He coaches for the University of Texas, and he's won 5 national. His name's Augie, and he's won 5 national championships with 5 different schools, which is unheard of. It's to do that, and Rick was very moved by him because people, you know, the Yankees are always trying to get him, and he says, "I hate professional baseball because in professional baseball the point is to try and win, and in college baseball my job is to teach these young men how to be men and how baseball can help them." And often we do end up winning because we're playing the right way, and it's a very kind of beautiful idea. Wow. And so that documentary did live in my head when it gave me permission to think that I could do this.
Did you ever meet Richard Linklater? Because these are 2 people obviously so important to your life. Did they connect for you?
They haven't met yet. No,
No?
Rick's seen the
I
movie.
never met him.
Yeah.
No.
You guys will like each other.
By the way, you know what happened? After all, was I ever in a movie before? Never.
Well, but we see you doing a tape where it's, you know, you're teaching the camera. That was clearly done before this movie. It was not a movie, but you had done something for a camera.
Yeah, well, that was, I put a chapter of my book into film, and it was very embarrassing when I hear it. But, you know, this is a real movie, right? And so, you know, picture me now. I'm a movie star at 88. Did you ever hear of any? Do you know any movie star who's 88? I'm sort of like a composite of Grandma Moses, who started to paint when she was 90, right? So now, this is what happened. The first day of shooting arrives in my apartment. I'm scared out of my mind. I have no idea what's going to happen. He never tells me anything. I didn't know what was going to happen.
He wants spontaneity, right?
The doorbell rings, and Ramsey and Greg
Cinematographer
and Heather, the whole staff, they're all here, you know. You met them. And Annie, who edited the movie, they're all here. They came into my house, and they laid cables and cameras and microphones, and I looked around. I couldn't even walk to the bathroom. There was so much equipment. The bell rings, he comes in. And we start, there's always electricity between us. We're always engaged in a very intense conversation. His wife says, "Seymour, get up on that sofa. Stop talking to my husband. Everything that you're talking about is supposed to be in the movie. And don't sit next to him during lunch either."
That's a real producer. I mean, your wife, Ryan, is producer of the film, right?
Okay, so now the first shoot takes place. Seymour sit at the piano, and the camera's set up. "Ramsey, are you rolling?" "We're rolling." I have no idea what's going to happen. I hear a voice coming at me. I'm spaced out. Do I have to tell you? I'm spaced out, and this voice says, "Seymour, play something spiritual." So I start to play some little Bach piece that's very spiritual. Then he asks me what it was that I played, and that's not even in the movie. None of that is even in the movie. So what I want to tell you is, there was no script. There was no rehearsals, ever. We never rehearsed anything. Everything that you saw on that documentary was spontaneous conversation. So one of the reporters asked me, how did I feel acting in the movie when I never acted before? I said, excuse me, but I wasn't acting. I was simply having a conversation with whoever was talking to me. Just as I'm talking to you. There was nothing that was rehearsed. The only thing that was rehearsed was, you know that I was reading some sections of my book, right? And this guy said to me, you have to do it 3 times because the 3rd time is always the best. That's the only thing that I ever repeated. Now when I gave my recital, and by the way, they surprised me and they edited the whole recital. It's going to be issued as a separate DVD. And I heard it. Greg sent me a copy of it through my computer. And you know how I cried when I was speaking about the army? Well, I listened to this recital. I cried through the whole thing. It's so beautiful. So, and even there, you know, when musicians make a recording, you know, they splice things together. Not one note was repeated. Nothing in this movie was repeated. I think it's amazing, don't you think so?
Well, I mean, first of all, I do consider it amazing because Ethan Hawke has never directed a documentary before. And I was, to be honest with you, shocked when I first heard about this project. I said, Ethan Hawke, he's so damn busy, he never stops shooting. He's making a documentary, right? But then when I saw the film, what you're saying is, I mean, there's a tremendous respect that this film and that Ethan manifest, and if I understand correctly, even though nothing was staged, quote, rehearsed, whatever, would I be right in assuming that you would not have given that concert in the Steinway Hall on 57th Street had Ethan not created the entire context through the film to do so?
Oh, I know I would never have played.
Well, then here's a case where a documentary didn't just record or capture a life, it actually played a major role in creating another event and stage of your life and of your professional career. I mean, now that you did, go for it.
I'm dying to say something.
Go for it.
I'm dying to say something. I think everybody here knows Seymour is very complimentary about the job I did on the documentary, but I think everybody leaving here will know that it's pretty easy to do. You know, it's extremely easy to do. Every time I do one of these Q&As, I think to myself, damn it, Greg, why didn't we put that in the documentary? Like, we should have done this. We should have taken more time. There's so much.
Well, we have to make a sequel.
We'll make a sequel. And
it won't hurt in the sequel. We should have a little porn in it.
Yeah. You know what I mean? We'll get some real sex in it. But I want to get this out there too, which is that I had a tremendous amount of help. And you know, the people work, you talk about porn, nobody listens to anything. Can I say one more serious thing though? Because it'll bother me if I leave here tonight and I didn't get to say this. I was joking about that review thing and then I got myself in too deep and I didn't know how to get out of it. And then you said something very serious about that you weren't that worried about the opening because you had a different relationship to your art that went beyond what other people thought about it. And, you know, I was actually scared to say that because I thought that it would sound egocentric or something.
Mystical? Maybe.
No. What I find very interesting, and one of the things that I really have learned from this experience, is how scared a lot of us are to walk with self-regard. And so, you know, the idea of letting yourself love yourself, that if you can't love yourself, you really can't begin the process of contributing to others. And the truth is that I actually didn't mind the reviews that much, and I learned an incredibly valuable lesson, which is that critics generally review their relationship to the character, and that this person who was reviewing me really didn't like Constantine. And they found Constantine in an age when he should be worried, shouldn't be taking himself so seriously. Do you know he should be getting rid of his pimples? And this person is obviously in a lot of pain, if that's what they're thinking about. And I really kind of learned that part of what happens is when you get good reviews is that people are having a positive relationship to your character, even if it's a villain or something. But you're doing what they want you to be doing. And that I wish that I would give myself permission to, most people wouldn't say they watched the performance and thought it was great, But there's a moment we cut out of the documentary too, which is that when my daughter said this thing about, she asked you a question in the concert, you remember? Greg, are you here? Yeah. What did she say?
Yes, when did I discover?
Anyway, the point is, he said, the truth is that I learned to love myself, and does that sound conceited? And Maya, my daughter, said, well, not when you say it, And I know exactly what she means, but it is so hard for us to find that balance between dignity, self-respect, and making sure we're also nervous about our own insecurities and about being arrogant. We all hate arrogance in others. In finding what that razor's edge is, and you walk it, but it's very hard to do. And I found it interesting that I couldn't answer that question, that I felt exactly the way that you said. But now I'm better because I got that.
Well, you know what I answered? You know what I answered your daughter when she said, when did you discover this? Mm-hmm. I said, let's see, I think 1843 or something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, are we done?
We are going to take a few questions. I mean, I've got 2 pages of questions, but I'm not going to
you didn't know that we'd
tonight.
speak for half an hour after every question?
Well, no, that's all right. We are going to take a few. There are 2 people who have hands right up there, a woman right there, and then the woman behind in the glasses, yes? That's G. Go ahead. Yeah, you.
Will I just talk like this?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to repeat the question.
I'll get the serious question out of the way so we make more room for the good ones later. So we know the piano has a steel box that is capable of arrays of showmanship and monstrosity and virtuosity.
I'm going to try to repeat because I know that you're not heard in the back. We know the piano is a steel box that is capable of monstrosity and
Virtuosity.
And showmanship.
And showmanship.
Yes, and you see that a lot in today's classical music. However, what touched me deeply was the music choices in this film.
What touched me deeply were the music choices in this film.
And I noticed a leitmotif of a piece that is also tremendously meaningful to me. And Seymour, I will announce it for you. It's Bach, Cantata number 106.
The Bach Cantata number 106 seems to be a leitmotif in this film.
The title is God's Time is the Best Time.
I'm sorry, the title is
Guts time.
God's
did
Time
you-
is the Best Time?
How did you know that? Because very few people ever heard that piece before.
Yes, I play that on a daily basis.
Do you play it, really?
She plays it on a
in
daily
German?
basis.
You
I
always
happen
say
to
it
know
in
that this
German.
woman is a fantastic composer and
Gottes
student.
Zeit is the allerbeste Zeit.
Yeah.
Gottes Zeit is the allerbeste Zeit. God's time is always the best time.
And the Brahms Opus 18, number 2.
And the Brahms Opus 18 number 2.
And my reason for loving these pieces is that they know every secret, the innermost secret of my heart and of my vulnerabilities.
That these pieces seem to know the secrets of this person's vulnerability.
Wow.
And I'm just going to have to ask that we get to the question because I know a lot of people behind you have their hands up.
And it ties back to your statement about breath, because these pieces almost give me permission to take my first real breath, which means my life begins there. Now, Seymour, my question for you is that what is your reason for playing these pieces at your advanced
My reason.
What are Seymour's reasons for playing these particular pieces at this time of life?
Yes, and my question for Ethan is that what is your reason for choosing to show the softer and the tender?
And what is Ethan's reason for choosing to show the more soft and tender aspects of this?
Your answer is going to be more interesting. Mine's going to be short. My favorite thing that Seymour says is, "Let us now shed our guilt of the use of the soft pedal." I love that thing. And so I didn't pick those pieces. These are pieces that he loves, and because of exactly that. So you answer the question.
I chose those pieces for the same reason of what you said, because they reflect the deepest feelings of my heart, my soul, and all human, all the deepest human feelings I feel are within those two pieces. Not only those two pieces, but I just happen to have chosen them for the reasons that you stated. Are you a pianist?
Yes.
Well, you must play gorgeously to express yourself like that.
Okay. We have one question right behind, and then I'll go to this side. Yes.
Well, it's more a technical question. You mentioned the Schuberts. Robert and Clara had a great passionate love affair.
Schumann, yes.
Schumann had a great love affair. And I Googled and I read pages and pages about both of them. Robert could not play because he did something to his hand.
He injured his finger. He tried to strengthen his fourth finger, and he attached a cord to it and put it around a pulley with a weight down here and pushed it against the weight and ruined his hand.
But he played music by composing, and Clara, I understand, played her own composed music and her own technique, and some of his pieces. My question is, they were influenced because of something physical that happened, and he could not continue to play, yet she had 8 children, took care of the household, and did everything. What was your influence for telling us in the film that one should play and also compose?
The question really is, what is the influence in your life that leads you to say in the film that one should play and also compose, given the history of Clara and Robert Schumann, which had so many complicated factors? Clara Schumann raising 8 children while trying to be a pianist.
Well, until the beginning of the 1900s, it was unthinkable for anyone to study an instrument without composing. And around the time of Rachmaninoff, who was the last great composer pianist, after that, the composer and the performer separated company. And mostly at fault is our educational system, and chiefly our conservatories of music. Because if you enter a conservatory of music in New York, you audition as an instrumental or a singer, a major, right? Or a composition major, but you never audition for both. And I have a bad feeling about the school where I teach.
NYU?
At NYU. Because I feel that when the students play their juries and they're required to play a 20th century piece, they should compose it themselves. But they don't allow it. See? They don't. We live in a society now where creativity is not encouraged. And that's a shame. So from the earliest time on, I always wanted to be creative. And I remember writing poems, and I would bring it to my teacher. And my teacher would listen and say, oh, that's so lovely. Let's get on with our hand-in exercises now. They wouldn't take it seriously. Or I would bring them a piece that I would compose, and they wouldn't encourage it. They sort of patronized it. So now I'm 50 years old, and I've had enough of this, and I wanted to really be serious about my creative world. See where I'm sitting now? On this stage? This is where I enacted it. Right here. Here was the concert grand. I played my farewell concert. Never gave another concert again until this guy asked me to. I wasn't going to let him down. No way.
And then did you keep composing after that concert at the Y? That's
what are you talking about?
That's what you kept doing.
At the end of my recital for his theater group in the Rotunda of Steinway, I played my Book of Birds, right? So what do you think happened? One of his actors came up to me, said, how come you didn't write a hawk? So you know what I did? I composed a hawk. And it's on YouTube. You can hear it. And it's dedicated to him.
It's very good.
I like that. A woman here on the aisle, and then that one. Yes.
First of all, congratulations to both of you and to Annie, the editor.
Anna, yeah.
Yeah, just beautiful, beautiful film. And I just want to ask you, Ethan, how much do you love classical music, and did you fall in love with it recently, or is this
For Ethan, did you fall in love with classical music just recently? Did it come from a long time before?
or what is classical music?
What has classical music meant to you?
You know, I've always believed in that Mark Twain quote that all art aspires to be music. And I've always found that, you know, when you study Shakespeare, everything is all about the musicality of the rhythm and the language and the words and the sounds. And I've always, doing some of the early Shepherd plays that I used to be really into, about the percussion that's involved in those Shepherd plays. And I have, through a passion for country music and a lot of other kinds of music, found myself gravitating as I got older, mysteriously, towards classical music. And music without words has become more and more interesting to me. And I think jazz was an entry point. But this has been a major, it's fascinating to me now when I'm driving and on the radio comes classical music. 15 years ago, I would have spun right over it. Now I'm like, wow, which one would this be? Yeah, I'm finding it's so exciting to find. It's really the best music in the world, and I didn't know it. And it's one of those things you have to be taught to listen. I got to play Chet Baker last year, and who was a jazz musician, but getting to experience listening to all that music in the time sequence really that it came out, and really diving deep into that music, you kind of teach your ear to see what's special about it, and then you find yourself laughing at phrases, and it's just so amazing. I love music for that.
Will you allow me to tell them what you said to me in the green room a few minutes ago?
I think so. Of course, anything.
I told you I have total recall.
I know, so let it out.
My poor pupils, when they come for their lesson the next 2 weeks, I give usually alternate week lessons. I remember everything that I told them 2 weeks earlier. And they play for me, and I say, do you remember I discussed this phrase with you? And they turn white. Anyway, when we were in the back room, Ethan said to me, you know what? our documentary is really an ode to music. That's what he said. I just melted.
It is.
But one of the things that I think makes it even more than that is, for example, when you acknowledge how music has dissonances as well as harmonies, and without the dissonance, you just won't appreciate the resolution. The love of music is informed by a sense of how music informs life. In other words, that we have so much to learn from music in addition to listening to it with great attentiveness and respect. This will be the last question.
It's for Ethan. You decided to put yourself in the film, and that's something that a lot of documentary companies...
For Ethan, you decided to put yourself in the film, which not all documentary filmmakers do.
Some do, and of course, I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me that in this case it makes perfect sense. My question is, why so little? Was there originally more of you?
But why is there so little of you in the documentary? Was there originally more of you? And I'm going to push your question to ask, why have Michael Kimmelman interview the extended interview with Seymour rather than, let's say, you?
Well, okay, that's kind of a good question to go out on, I think, because that was a real good, I never knew. I mean, on one level, when I kept likening this documentary in a way to my favorite. I grew up reading a lot of the Rolling Stone interviews, and Cameron Crowe always had some great Rolling Stone profiles where his character, you would know why he was so interested in this musician because he included some of his background, and it gave it context of why you were being told this story. Because let's face it, different people could make very different documentaries about any one of us. And I didn't know how to do that, and I really relied on my people I was collaborating with to tell me when was too much and when was too little, and I was super insecure about it because I think that a film needs to have a point of view, and that it is interesting why somebody's making a movie. What possesses you to want to make this movie? You know, and I think it is relevant. And I also thought it was a relevant way to show that how much the arts have in common, that this isn't just a movie for pianists. This is a moment about how the piano relates to all of us. And I thought it could be useful like that. But what do you think?
I had a feeling that you knew, of course, that I taught Michael since he was 5 years old.
And that's why I wanted Michael to do it.
And I'm still teaching him. And I think you figured that no one knew me better than he did. And I also felt that you wanted, through him, to question me
in ways that I could.
As to the real reason why I quit my career.
That is true.
You thought maybe there's something that I haven't told you.
Not that you hadn't told me, but that I wasn't qualified to ask. You know what I mean? He loves you. And you guys love each other, and I thought that two things. One is that anybody who meets Michael Kimmelman knows what a serious person he is.
Whoa, is he ever, yes.
And so I thought that if he told the audience that you were a phenomenal musician, that they would listen.
I see.
That was one job that I wanted him to do.
Do you know that he's one of the most phenomenal pianists that you could ever hear? You can't tell him apart from a real pro. He's extraordinary.
Well, he's a beautiful writer. If you haven't read his work, Michael Kimmelman, you should. He's a beautiful writer, and he's a very serious person. And I did think the tough question to ask you is, did you quit because it made you too nervous? And to what extent is that? I remember I got to meet Daniel Day-Lewis one time in a period when he had quit acting, and I was so upset that he'd quit acting that I just couldn't shut up about it. You know? I mean, it's an obligation. It's not up to you. You know? I want to see you act, brother. You know? And we're all, and so, and I kind of wanted Michael to say that to you because he felt so passionately about your playing, and I thought it would spark a good conversation, and it did. So there.
Well,
Thank you for, hey,
Wait.
this is where he played his farewell concert.
Yeah.
And it means so much to us to a little bit before the movie comes out, to get to come back to this stage and be with you all.
By the way, for
The
us,
scene of the crime.
it is a hell of a big deal. This film opens Friday, March 13th, and especially because this is the close of the Genius Week, I just want to propose that the word genius starts with G-E-N, but so does the word generosity. And I do believe that the two are far more linked than any of us ever assumed.
Well said.
And I would just like to thank, first of all, Seymour Bernstein for the way that he ennobles the art of teaching, and that there is a genius to the way that you help individuals realize their voice. And to thank Ethan because he makes a lot of movies, and he could have spent his time in very different ways and make a hell of a lot more money than doing a documentary. But there's great generosity in your choice to make this film. And because of it, I think that you answer your own voice in the film that says, playing life more beautifully. I think you can now that you've made this film. Thank you both.
Thank you all.